So, hi, Steph. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I am incredibly excited to talk to you today. It's kind of like a full circle moment because your book, The Vein, was like my first indie horror read, I think ever. Yeah.
Stop, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and so I think that was like my first one, and the first one that I reviewed for sure. And so it's been like a little over a year now, so I'm super excited to get to talk to you about all of the books and stories that you've released in between because you're a very busy woman and you have a new release next week, The Threshing Floor, so I'd love to talk to you about that. But if anybody doesn't know you, do you want to introduce yourself about who you are, what you do, and all those kind of good things?
Sure. I'm Steph Nelson. I write dark books, horror and thriller. I live in Boise, Idaho. Not really that interesting other than that. I just like spend a lot of time at my computer and either marketing my books or writing them, editing them, as you know. So, yeah, that's me.
Yeah, no, you are incredibly busy though because you had The Vein that came out last year, I think in August with Dark Matter, and
Yeah.
then you had Sawtooth that came out, and then there was also The Final Scene, which I see your poster for behind
Yeah.
you, that came out earlier this year, and then now The Threshing Floor. So, do you want to talk a little bit like what's that been like? Has it been like really, really busy, or are these things that you had written before and they're just kind of coming to be published now?
Okay, so um I wrote, okay, let me see. I wrote The Threshing Floor like right after Sawtooth. So it's been
Yeah.
done for a long time. And I signed it with Dark Matter, like this, I think before the Vein even published. So
Oh,
that's
wow.
been
Okay.
like, kind of done for a long time. I had written those three books kind of like in like over a year or so and
Yeah.
then released. The final scene I wrote really quickly, and then just put it out on my own. Um, and so the funny thing is that even though the Threshing Floor is coming out next week, it's like been in process for so long that I forget
Yeah.
that it's like the book after the final scene. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. And like I was talking to Brian McCauley yesterday, we were joking like time is an
Awesome.
illusion, is not real. And like especially since COVID, like I can't imagine what that's been like, dealing with the writing, the publishing, and then just life in general with, how everything falls. And
Yeah.
it's funny that you mentioned like kind of the order that they came out because in some ways I read The Threshing Floor and I loved it very, very much. And it feels like the perfect kind of mix of The Vein, which is like it feels like very gritty, very tried and true horror, kind of
Mm-hmm.
mixed, like with that detective narrative. And then, the final scene was like very much a thriller, in my
Yeah.
opinion, and like had hit those same tropes and things. And I really felt like The Floor was like this perfect convergence of those. So
Yeah,
it's
it's kind of the
interesting.
middle.
Yeah, it's interesting how that kind of writing process, you say how it happened, but it really feels like both of them together.
Yeah, yeah, totally. It's the thing that I think they all kind of have in common, maybe the vein least of all, is I like to write fast-paced stuff. I think the vein,
Yeah.
I would say it's my slowest one, but even then, I don't think it's super slow by any
No.
means. But that kind of dynamic has stayed no matter what genre for me. Like, I think that I like to read fast things, and so I tend to like write fast things.
No,
But
that
yeah,
makes
it
sense.
is a good blend of the two books, I think. The
Yeah, and
Threshing Floor.
it's like kind of funny because like I've read thrillers for like forever. That was like my book of choice before I
Okay.
started reading horror. So like your work especially speaks to me because it's got the best of both worlds in some ways.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of curious, like I have my own like definition of what I think like horror is versus thrillers, but like what do you think the difference is if there even is one or if it's just like a marketing tool?
This is actually a very controversial question.
I know. I know.
But I'm going to take a stab at it. This is just my opinion.
Yes,
Nobody
yes.
come for me. Um, to me, I think, I mean, there is something to the pacing, I think,
Yeah.
with like thrillers are always fast. I mean, unless it's a slow burn, but even then, there's something about it that's pulling you in to where you're like, I can't set this book down, you know? So it doesn't have to be like a hair on fire, what's next, but something about it just like holds your interest so deeply that you like will not go to the bathroom for 2 hours because you have to keep reading. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And horror to me is a little more of like like building dread and like a lot of creep factor and like atmosphere. That I think at a basic level, but I think if we're talking marketing, because marketing does play into it, The difference is spec and supernatural or not.
Yeah, that's what
That's the
I've always.
controversial
No,
part.
that's kind of like what I've used because I was talking to a friend about this the other day. I forget, I wish I could say what book we were talking about. And I was like, "Oh no, it felt more thriller than it did horror." And they were like, "Well, what do you use to like determine one of the two?" And I'm like, "Well, whenever you have a conflict at the center of a story, if like the who done it part of it, like what's causing the problem ends up to be something like otherworldly or something not explainable by logical terms that we know in the real world, then I would say that probably falls horror. But
Yep.
then typically thrillers are, in my experience, they're more rooted in, our day-to-day kind of mundane life. But I
Mhm.
don't know if that holds up at all. I know that
Well,
there's
it
a lot
holds
of
up
opinions on it.
for readers, it holds up. I think sometimes I wonder if authors and readers, there's a little bit of a disconnect. And how do I say this? A thriller reader, in my experience, marketing my books, won't pick something up if there's ghosts or supernatural elements. They're
Yeah.
just like, nope, that's not for me. Now, they'll totally go to the movie theater and watch Longlegs and be fine.
Yeah,
No, but
exactly.
it's like they won't read it, and I don't know why. It's a little bit of like a brain block, I think, that a lot of readers have. Where thriller reader, I mean, horror readers, they read anything. Like, give me murdery serial killers, great, I love it. Like, it's dark, it's up my alley. And I think horror readers would like look at the final scene and say, that's horror. But
Yeah.
thriller readers wouldn't pick it up if it was like thriller readers that read the final scene are not really reading the vein. Like there's not a
Right.
connect there because they read
Yeah.
the back and they're like, well, not for me. Creepy mind, cosmic shit. Nope.
No,
So
I totally know what you mean by that.
I think that that's a pretty good definer down the middle of is there supernatural elements or not, which the threshing floor, if I can say, does have supernatural elements. And it's gonna be curious to see if that's forgivable or not to thriller readers, because
I
sometimes it is if it's minor, but sometimes not. So
Yeah, I think, and this is again, this is just my personal opinion and like kind of like in my own personal journey with like reading thrillers and then like opening myself up because I think I was kind of like that too. I was like, oh, I don't know if I can buy into the horror aspect of it. And then like there's also the fear component too. Because like to me, when I was like in college and I was a single girl hanging out by herself a lot of the time, I was like, oh, I don't want to read something that's going to freak me out. Reading a thriller feels closer to like reading fact because it's a reality I can handle,
mhm.
versus like the unknown. Like, you don't want to open up your closet to like the weird thing you can't explain, but
Yeah.
maybe if it's grounded, it makes more sense. But, like along the same lines of like what you were mentioning with the threshing floor, I think it's written in a way that's like intuitive and it makes sense. And it's just like it's an exaggeration of something that we know to be true with society. Like, and to be blunt, like this is a cult novel. Like it's
Yeah.
something that deals with, control, manipulation, all those things. And the things that you use, simply inflate those ideas into a different space, if that makes any sense. At least in my
Oh, yeah.
reading of it.
No, it does. And interestingly enough, I could even argue that it isn't supernatural
Yeah.
because one of the kind of things that inspired the gold hands idea
Yeah.
was being a Christian in a church where they literally believed that the Holy Spirit was going to put gold dust on your hands or in your hair or in your teeth as like a manifestation of his glory. So it's like,
Yeah.
to some people, that's actually not like it is supernatural, but that's also grounded in reality for some people. I
Oh.
mean, that's a stretch, but
No, but like even if you wanted to take it in a space of like narcissism or, any of those like personality disorders where like grandiosity is such a thing and you're like actually believing that you're the second coming of whatever and whatever faith that you subscribe to, then like that totally fits within this narrative as well. So I think
yeah.
in almost a way, yeah, it does read a little bit more horror, but I think also if you don't want it to, it doesn't have to. I think it kind of serves both, at least in my reading of it. So
Yeah, for sure. And I don't really mind either way. It's really not. I mean, I'll do my marketing and people will find it that want it and not read it that don't. And that's the beauty of reading. There's so many books.
yes, no, that's so true. But just to talk a little bit about the threshing floor in general, and if anybody is not aware of what the threshing floor is about, like I mentioned, it's kind of a cult novel, but it's about a lot of other things. It's about a single mom who has a child who is ill. He has a heart defect, and she's doing her best to make ends meet and do the best by her son. But then also she meets somebody, and then events ensue to give like the broad overview of that. What I really like with what you've done, I think with all of your work is, you read the synopsis and you're like, okay, I think I know what this is going to be about. And then every time it's very much not. It's
Oh,
and that's something that like whenever I pick this one up, I'm like, oh, here we go, like with the guy, and I don't want to spoil it. So I had an expectation of like who would be the big bad, so to
oh
speak.
yeah. Uh-huh.
And that was very much subverted. And I really, really enjoy that about your works. Is that something that you bring to
Oh,
the table consciously when you sit down to read, or is that just like coming to you naturally?
I don't know. That's a good question. Do you mean like subverting the kind of expectations? Is that what you mean?
A little bit, and like, a lot of times, and I'm trying my best to not say spoilers, but a lot of times whenever you
I don't
read
think there's a
about,
ton of spoilers. Like you're
yeah,
okay.
like, okay, so for instance, whenever our main character meets Shane, the guy, and then,
Yeah.
he brings her into this lifestyle that she didn't,
Mhm.
ha is not accustomed to and kind of gets really, really obsessed with, or not really obsessed with, but her life kind of revolves around it, and for good reason.
Yeah.
I thought for sure we were going to be looking at Shane the whole entire time, but
Oh,
it's
I
a
didn't do that
much
on purpose.
grander. Yeah. And like, and I guess that's the other thing too about like the thriller formula is like I love when it breaks the mold. Like for instance, like
Mm,
Simone St. James, she writes like thriller
I love
horrors as
her.
well. And like her latest one, Murder Road, it was about a couple who was confronting this thing together. They were not against each other. And like a lot of like the rise of the domestic thriller
Yeah.
has made that mistrust between spouses or partners so integral to the plot point. And
Yeah, that's
I love that we're moving away from it. I really enjoyed that.
yeah, and that is a big, big subgenre of thriller. It's
Yes.
very popular. But I haven't read Murder Road yet. I need to because I've read almost all of her other stuff. That sounds really intriguing.
Yeah, it's a nice change of pace and like, you kind of it's a break from the formula. And like don't get me wrong, like every now and then I'll crave one like where you trust no one, all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff and I love good thriller
Yeah.
like that. But and like the same thing kind of like with The Vein, like that kind of moved in a different direction than not that I was expecting because that was just so much fun. That was like just everything that I love in a gritty
Oh,
horror crime book. But then also like with the final scene, it doesn't really fit a typical beat for beat thriller. Like, and I really, really enjoy not conforming to the mold. You know what I mean?
yeah, I appreciate that. I guess I do kind of, when I set out, I get kind of a trope in mind, and then I'm like, I wouldn't say that I subvert because other authors do that so much better. Like there's just such like a political, like activist element of subversive horror, and I don't claim I'm not doing that. I'm just more like, how can I like just look at it from a different angle or like I don't
Yeah.
know, put some powder on it, freshen it up, make it look a little feel a little different, but it's basically the same thing. Like I get bored easily. And so that's, I think, maybe why I gravitate toward doing that.
Yeah.
Even I just finished another draft of another book, and it was hard because I was like, I had a trope, and I'm like, okay, but how do I like make it different?
Yeah.
I'm always
No.
looking for ways to do that. So I appreciate that you noticed that.
Yeah, no, it definitely comes through because like I said, like in my mind, it probably comes from having read like so much horror and thriller. Like I'm used to kind of like the beat for beat. And I don't think it's happened for any of your books where I've predicted quite successfully how things are gonna go.
Oh, that's such a compliment. Thank you.
Anytime, anytime. But to get back a little bit more in specific about the threshing floor. So, this is obviously a very personal story, and I definitely want to respect however much or however little you want to talk about this. But do you want to talk about, kind of the foundations of the story, your inspiration, and like your experiences that you brought to the table with this story?
Sure. Well, it was kind of twofold. It's my personal life. I have a very like religious background. I was the evangelical fundamentalist Christian until about 10 years ago.
Hmm.
So a lot of like the word for word, like we had a thing called the threshing floor, and nobody got, naked or anything like that. It wasn't that crazy, but
Yeah.
you would get roasted. Like you'd sit in a hot seat and everybody would confront you with all of your flaws so that you
Yeah.
could be more holy. And so that was like taken from a real thing. A lot of that stuff was. And then it was meshed with losing a child. I lost a child 15, 16 years ago now. And I dedicated the book to her. Her name was Evelyn. And she died of like a really multiple severe heart conditions and lung conditions. And the weird thing is that I had a best friend. She's still my best friend. But at the time, she had a baby 2, 3 years ahead of me with almost the same thing. Like
Oh,
he
wow.
had 3 open heart surgeries before he was like 5 years old. So
Yeah.
to me, in my world, when we got the diagnosis, when I was 20 weeks pregnant with Evelyn, it was like, oh, no big deal. Heidi had a baby like this. Like Oliver's fine. Evelyn's gonna be fine. I really never like took in the gravity of it.
Yeah.
Then after she was born, like I say in my author's note, like they found seven other massive things. And we
Yeah.
went to go down to California from Idaho because they didn't have the resources here. And the top surgeon, pediatric heart surgeon at Stanford, sat across the table from me and said, I mean, I can like open her up and see what we can do, but she probably won't leave the NICU. And so me and my husband at the time had to decide like, well, what do we do? Anyway, we chose to like not let him play weird mad scientist on our
Yeah.
child.
Yeah.
And she passed away. It was beautiful. Like we got to hold her and bathe her, all these things we couldn't do before because she was just so
Right.
sedated.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I wanted to like explore that, but with a different outcome, like where, I mean, that I guess maybe is a spoiler, although it's not really like, of course, that baby doesn't die.
No, it's not a
um,
spoiler.
I don't know if it's a spoiler or not.
No, no, no.
But I think my biggest concern in doing that though is I didn't want to trivialize anyone else's experiences because everyone is
Yeah.
like has such a different experience with medical trauma with their kids and whether heart conditions or whatever. So I mentioned that in my note too, but I just really wanted to like know what it would have been like to not lose your child in that situation.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Yeah, no, I mean, it comes through very clearly in your writing and in a very authentic and like, in your author's note, you mentioned how you didn't want to trivialize anybody else's experience. I mean, I can't say for myself because I haven't endured anything like that, but it certainly didn't read that way to me. And like, I think, a lot of what I've talked to a lot of authors about is like writing from a really raw place and like what it means to give yourself in some of your work. And I know it's not an easy thing, but there's a certain, it comes across in a certain way, and I think that you did that part of your life service in this story. Like
oh, thank you.
I think it like reads very authentically and it adds, like another layer of like real, not like real stakes and tension to this story because I think like the best horror stories are the ones that can function without any of the other extra added horrors. Like I've said this
Yeah.
about like American Rapture from CJ Lee. Like you could take the
Oh, that's what I'm reading right now.
Oh, good. I love that book so much. You can take the terrible pandemic, whatever you want to call it, virus that's sweeping the nation out of it, and that still reads as a horror story to me.
Yes.
Um, yeah, and so there are components of this story, I think, as well, just like dealing with life and trying to make ends meet and everything else like that reads the same way. So I know it probably wasn't easy at all, but
It was therapeutic though. It was,
yeah.
I don't know. I gravitate back to writing about grief so much. I'm like, will I ever get even this book I just finished? I'm like, it's about grief again. Eventually, maybe I'll get to more past that, but maybe not.
Well, it's like, grief and death is like the most universal human experience. Like, we
Yeah,
all have to face our own eventual death,
absolutely.
and in addition to the people around us. So, I mean, it's like the one great equalizer. And so I think it's one of those things that it's always going to show up in that way, um, because of that. Like, it's just the one piece of foundation that everybody kind of gets in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, it's very true.
Yeah. But to go back to the religious thing, yeah, a lot of what happened in your story, like, I was Catholic. And I went to
Right.
like Catholic school for like 14 years because it was like
Oh,
pre-K to
okay.
12. And so you're reading Rapture right now. I don't know how far
I
into
am
it you
not far.
are.
I just started. I'm taking it on a cruise next week, so that'll be fun.
Oh, I can't wait to see what you think about it because there's parts of the Threshing Floor in that book that like really, really resonated with me for
Oh,
like the similar
interesting.
reasons. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but it's good stuff. It's really, really good stuff.
I did.
So that's what you're reading now. So what's something else that you've read recently? And I also wanted to ask you a little bit about this too. Whenever you read something, do you find that it affects your writing, or are those like two completely separate, or does
Yeah.
your what you're writing influence what you pick up? Like that kind of relationship.
Yes. Yes, both and I would say. I think mostly it's really hard for me to, how do I say this? It's really hard to turn my editor brain off when I read a book for enjoyment. And I've
Yeah,
actually
yeah,
heard lately some authors say, listen to audiobooks because if there's something about seeing the words, like my brain just goes into like kind of correcting mode. And it's so when a book can like pull me out of that, when I'm reading
Yeah.
and I'm like, oh my word, I haven't even like thought about the mechanics of the story for like two chapters, then I like so get so excited. So I, as far as like what it affects, I think a lot of times I will just mostly fangirl. Okay, so another example, I brought my stack of books that I was going to talk about.
Yeah.
Another, of course, Rachel Harrison. I
Yes.
read this one recently, and every time she writes a book, I'm like, man, she writes women so well. Like, so I'll get kind of inspired. Like, I don't want to be
Yeah.
like that. I want to do that. I want to nail it. Not exactly like she does, but like, I try to like pick apart, like, what's she doing that's like really working? And like, so that's kind of like, in addition to editing, I usually try not to negatively edit when I read in my mind. I try to be like, what are they doing that's working? What do readers love
Yeah.
about it? Like, what's the nugget here that I can like take and like mull over and then like maybe somehow produce something better than what I had been doing before.
That makes
Um,
sense.
so I think from that standpoint, that's kind of what I do. But yes, if I'm like starting to feel like I need to get more of a feel on a subgenre, then I'll go on a deep dive and read like I'll just look at the Amazon top 100 and be like, okay, what are all the domestic thrillers that people are reading right now? It's just Freedom McFadden, so I'm gonna go read Freedom McFadden. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah, I
I'll
do.
do
I
that,
do.
and then I'll like go be like, man, I just need like a love story. I love romance, so I'll like pick up a spicy romance and read that, and then so I guess yeah, that does influence. I do have some romance in my stuff, so I do get influenced by that, but it's very fluid and like I
Yeah.
just try to like follow whatever I'm feeling in my reading.
And that's one thing that I do like about your work as well is you write romance exceptionally well.
Oh, thank you.
Especially within like the landscape of like bad things. And it's never like the full focal point of the story, but it's a nice layer and it's like not just it feels very natural. And I think it's particularly interesting in horror. That it's there because like most of the times it's just not really something that, I know like the horror romance subgenre is like kind of on the up and up, but I think that
Yeah.
it's something that's especially pretty cool. And, saying that you enjoy romance, it kind of makes sense that that might kind of bleed into that. But I
Yes.
always enjoy them. I like that added element to it. It just adds a little bit more depth and, just like a little
Yeah.
extra layer. So,
I mean, just like death, love is something also that we all deal
yeah.
with to a degree. I mean, some of us are less lucky than others in love, but there's always time, It's like, so it's just kind of universal, I think, that
Yeah.
craving to be known also.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And like being like recognizing connection to like community, like that's
Mhm.
something I think is that you explore really well with the Threshing Floor is the dynamic between the two sisters. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, like what writing that relationship was like?
Yeah, it's funny because I do have a sister, but she's 10 years younger than me. And it's only
Oh
been like
yeah.
the last 2 years that we've really been close. So that is not based off of my sister relationship,
Yeah.
more based off of what I've observed in other sister relationships.
Yeah.
Just not constantly missing each other. I mean, I guess I do that with my siblings and my mom and dad as well. Like, one person's like vulnerable and open and the other person's shut down. And then the other, it's just like this constant, like never connecting, always missing, and just both sides kind of craving that connection, but just being clueless about how to actually land it.
Yeah, it's like interpersonal tension. Like whenever you can like really characterize them that well, like their
Mhm.
characterization shows through, so like what the other one can say to like push that person's buttons.
Yep.
And that's what comes through. And like I'm an only child, so like I have no
Okay.
idea what
Yeah.
sibling life is like. Although my fiance is one of three, so and he's the
Oh, then
oldest
you're getting
boy.
a sideline view to it.
Oh yeah. Oh, am I? Am I? Am I? Yeah. But yeah. But no, I also enjoyed like that familial component as well.
Yeah.
Um, and more so like with the vein, your main character, Syl Dixon, who I adore so much. I love
Oh.
her. She's kind of like in a lone wolf kind of state. Like she's really, really raw whenever we meet her in the vein and all that. And I feel like between the final scene and the threshing floor, there's like a different component to those women. Like you've written really diverse women who
Okay.
were like flawed for different reasons, but it's because they're human. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
yeah. Is there whenever you sit down to do like to think about characterization, are you
Mhm.
somebody who kind of like puts yourself in like that person's shoes, or is it like I know that you talked a little bit about like tropes and stuff. Like, what's your process to like writing a good character?
Oh, if you had asked me this question like before this book that I just finished, I would have been like, oh yeah, I totally just put myself in those shoes and like it's like no big deal. But this character that I just finished this next novel worked me over so hard. I could not connect with her. It was so, and then I just kept being like, why are you even in this novel character? Like, I don't even like connect with you at all. And it took finishing the entire draft, having one of my editor friends do like a first read, give me
Yeah.
really good feedback, and then it was like just unlocked. And it was like, oh my gosh, I know this character. And so then that this next book that's probably come out like in the spring, it's about like a cousin relationship
Oh, okay. Yeah.
that is like best friends, first friends kind of type of thing. And because
Yeah.
I have cousins like that, and I was able to like finally connect with her by making this other character instead of a best friend, a cousin.
Yeah.
Anyway, so sometimes it's easy and sometimes it's like I just write the character like I'm like, oh, I totally know this person. Like I don't really like know, like I'm not thinking of someone, but like I know
Right.
them. It's easy to write them. But this last one, it took a long time and I was really worried.
No, and I can imagine whenever you're dealing like with different personality types, like I talk about empathy and horror a lot, and like that's like the real key to like great characterization, in my opinion, is like being empathetic towards somebody else's stance, position, whatever that is not your own.
Yeah.
But I think it's an added challenge to like write a really well fleshed out, relatable character, even if that's not your own stance. And I
Yes.
imagine it's a challenge as a writer, as you just said.
Yeah, it is. It is. And this character, that was part of my problem. I really wanted her to be like emotionally reserved and like not willing to be vulnerable. And I'm opposite. I'm like, here I am. I hear all my feelings. I don't even care what people think. So it was really hard to tap into that. And I'm looking forward. I have a bunch of beta readers. I'm looking forward to hearing like ways that I can even increase that to make it more like less like me and more like someone who isn't me, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. And I like kind of, and I don't really know because I'm not an author, but I like the trend that I, at least I've heard of using beta readers to like really enhance like a the story in it every way, like in every possible way. Is that something that you've always done, or is that something that yeah,
I've always done it.
yeah.
With the vein, I did it just out of insecurity as a brand new author. Like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. Like, somebody help me, tell me why it's bad because it's better. It's better if a beta reader tells you than a one-star review on Amazon tells you. You know, like you're going to hear
Yeah.
it either way. So I used a lot of beta readers for the vein. I kind of whittled it down to like maybe three or four that I like trust and we read each other's stuff. And like, I
Yeah.
don't think I'll ever like really expand out of that because it just has become like a real good flow. And we know each other's writing and such. But I think it's genius. And I would never not use a beta reader. I don't, okay, maybe I can't say never not. I mean,
Yeah, no,
I can't
I know
imagine
what you
Stephen
mean.
King using beta readers, but I'm not Stephen King. So I think I'm going to use them.
I mean, I don't know that were beta readers around like
No,
whenever
I
you
don't.
got started.
It
I
seems
doubt
like a
it.
really collaborative, more collaborative approach for sure,
Yeah.
compared to the like, Ernest Hemingway stuck in a cabin by yourself, letting the words lead. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, I think that you get a more inclusive and authentic experience in doing so. And like it's a two different approaches, right? Like the Ernest Hemingway way is not bad by any means,
Nope,
obviously. I mean, there's
not
a
that.
reason that he's, who he is,
Totally.
but it's just two different forms of writing. And I think especially like in the world right now, we're like all really craving connection and community. So I think
Mhm.
that's why it really works so well right now.
I think so too. And I think for myself, I'll just say it. I'm not trying to write art. I'm trying to write something that is like meaningful to people and entertains them and they feel connected with, but I'm not trying to win awards. But Ernest Hemingway was. And so it's like I look at
Yeah.
people that are winning awards and I'm like, they're doing art. Like maybe you don't need a beta reader for art. I don't know. It's not what I'm doing.
Yeah, I don't know where the rule book is for
But
all this. Yeah.
I know.
There is no rule book, I guess.
No, I mean, if there is, I'm breaking it. Sorry.
Oh no. I think that there is no rule, and I think that whatever you bring to the table is what makes it work. And like we
Yeah.
reach for these stories because it's a different experience for a time. It's a different, world to visit for a time. I don't know what it says about horror people that we love to go and read all about terrible things all the
I
time, but
think it's to deal for me, I do it to deal with my anxiety a little
oh,
bit.
me
Like,
too. Yeah.
it's controllable. We've heard this before, but like I think there's something really cathartic about horror and yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I was talking to Brian McCauley also about like this good for her horror movement. recently, I find. Like, did you see The Substance yet?
I just saw it like 2 days ago.
Me
Oh my
too. Oh my
God.
God, me too. Yeah. And I kind of
Wow.
had like I loved it. Don't get me wrong. I loved
Yeah.
it. But then I kind of like sat back because everybody, like on social media too. And I understand like the marketing side of things. Like you want to brand things that are similar to others. So if you're going for like that Carrie quote unquote revenge vibe, then you're gonna comp and say like good for her horror or whatever. But I told Brian, I was like, man, I feel like good for her horror would be like if she just if there was no revenge needed at all. If
Yeah.
there like it just wasn't necessary.
Yeah.
But there is so much there's so many feelings associated with these stories being told that it is a catharsis. And like that's why we're
Yeah.
seeing it.
Maybe we'll evolve to that next after we get rid of all of our rage.
Yeah. Yeah.
We can not need to take revenge.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah. And like the substance is like what really kind of made me think about it. And like I read Carrie for the first time this year, so like that's been at the
Oh,
forefront of
yeah.
my mind. And
So
it
good.
just had like its anniversary, and so everybody was doing like podcasts on it and stuff like that, and it just like kind of made me sit back and think about it. But no, it's an interesting trend and an interesting
Yeah.
topic.
Yes. And I won't go off long about the substance, but just even the
Oh no,
body.
go ahead. I want to talk about it.
It was so I liked it a lot. I mean, it's hard. I looked away a lot too,
Oh, me
because
too.
like horror can really like touch you at the core and like move you in a way that's both sends a message and somehow touches you. It's pretty amazing in that way.
Absolutely. And
Um,
like in particular, the scene when she's in the mirror and she's like trying to get ready to go out for her date and she just can't get the look right. Like we have all been there. Like for one reason or another, even if it's like the clothes aren't working, the way that we look that day is not
yep,
working, like whatever it is, we have all been there. And oh my God, I was like that scene alone is
so
award
relatable.
worthy to
Well,
me.
it's so true, and it's like the way that we're conditioned that is who we are is the way that we look. Like so, there's
Yeah.
so much pressure on that moment, like to be exactly what you have to be for someone else. You know?
Exactly. And like the whole idea of like performing all the time. Like her
Oh my God,
her
yeah,
role of being a performer and like that is her identity says a lot too, I think. There's like so many
totally,
layers to that movie. Um
totally. And the constant refrain that you are one.
yeah. Yeah,
Woo!
I know. I know.
Anyway,
I know. I
such a
know.
good movie.
I had to look away a lot too. I'm like I'm such like the biggest weenie. Like Emily Hughes's book Horror for Weenies, like that's me.
Oh, I haven't read it.
It's just like she goes through and she'll like explain horror movies for people who cannot sit through them because of like the jump
Amazing.
scares, the overwhelming sensory stuff, and it's like written in a way that like horror people who love horror fiction can read it, understand it, and like get a grasp on what's going on within pop
Yeah.
culture and all this different stuff.
Oh, that's
It's like
awesome.
yeah, so like the substance is definitely one. Like I first of all, it wasn't playing in any theaters around me until like 9 o'clock every night, and I'm like, I'm not going to the movies at 9 o'clock at night.
No.
I'm grandma.
I
And
know.
second, and so we waited until it came on streaming, and we watched it, and I was still looking away. I was like still lowering the volume and looking away.
I know,
Like,
I was too. I don't really feel bad about it. I'm like, I just am editing my own. See, and that's like the anxiety thing. Like, I have the
yeah,
power to look away or pause or skip or whatever and still get the beauty of the message in the movie, or
yeah.
the experience.
Yeah, that's very, very true. But yeah, but enough about the substance. Love that movie.
Yeah.
On to the next thing. So what are you working? I don't know what you're allowed to say and what you're
Oh,
not
I'm
allowed to
my own
say.
boss. I'm allowed to say whatever I want.
Okay. So like what's next? Because you had an incredibly busy year from like if we look from August to now. So what's
Yeah, I
on the
guess so. You're
horizon?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so. I'm aiming for 2 books a year. So far I'm on track. The book that I just wrote is the one about the cousins, and it's kind of the trope is like woman goes missing, years later reappears type of thing.
Oh yeah. Did you read The Return by Rachel Harrison?
Yes, so good.
Okay. Yeah.
So this is pretty different than that, but that's
Okay.
the same trope. Like it's that same, sort of trope. Like in
Yes.
things aren't what they seem, and hopefully I was able to add a little bit of something to it to make it worthwhile. It's still not done, but that's what I have coming out next, and then I have to start thinking about another one pretty soon here. So
Yeah.
yeah,
That's exciting. And then I know, so like I still want to get this anthology, The Human Monsters, because I know that you have a short story in there,
yeah.
correct? Yeah.
hmm
Do you have any other short fiction works floating
I
around
have
anywhere
one,
or?
not very many. I have one in Human Monsters and one in Mother, Tales of Love and Terror, which
Oh
also is
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
pronounce for Bram Stoker. And then I just wrote one for Maddox Media, readings from Curse Room 301.
Oh,
And I think I have one in Dark Matter magazine, one of their magazines. But I
nice.
don't have very many. I wrote my novel and then I kind of did the backwards thing where then I was like, oh, people are saying that to publish a novel, you should have short stories. Maybe I should write some short stories. So I went backwards and wrote short stories and muddled my way through that, hit the jackpot with getting in Human Monsters as my first publication. Like that was insane. I still like have to be like, did that really happen to me? That doesn't my life. But then after I had a couple of those, it was like, I guess I can just publish now because my passion really is for longer fiction.
Yeah.
I I think it's more where I what I want to do. So then it was kind of like, I guess I don't really need to do this quite put so much effort into shorts as much, but they are fun.
Yeah. Do you find that your writing approach to writing shorter fiction is a whole lot different than long fiction, or is it
Way
kind of
harder,
just like, yeah.
so
Is it
much harder.
something that like you have short story ideas that end up spinning out into
Yes,
longer
that was
works or yeah.
Sawtooth. I was
Yeah.
writing Sawtooth to be because I wanted to submit it to. I was watching I don't know if they're still doing them even, but for a while, Apex magazine was doing these like critiques on YouTube of
Oh
like,
yeah.
I can't remember what they called it, but it was like they would read the opening line and then the people would raise their hand when they were like, nope, pass on that. So I was trying to learn how to like write a good short story. And Wendy Wagner from Nightmare Magazine
Yeah.
was on. And she was like, said something about wanting like a wilderness horror story. And I had
Yeah.
kind of the idea for something. So I was like, I'm going to write this. I'm going to write this for Wendy Wagner at Nightmare. And she's definitely going to love it. So I started writing it. And it just spiraled out of control. It was like, seriously, it's already like 50 pages and I'm not even so at some point, I just kind of had to give up and be like, this isn't a short story anymore. But
No,
it is a
it's a good one.
novella.
Yeah, no, I really enjoy it. I think I actually that's I have a hard time reading things in one sitting. Like I think I probably have like undiagnosed ADHD if we're being honest. But at any rate, that's one that I sat down and like I honestly read cover to cover like in an afternoon. I
Oh,
love
good.
that. I really really enjoyed that
It's pretty
one.
short too. That helps.
Yeah, but that was another really good one from you. But yeah, I can imagine like just ideas spinning out because like so there's so much inspiration everywhere I feel like right now.
Oh,
Like
there
I
is.
imagine it's very easy for things to just kind of expand and expand and expand.
Yeah. Yeah, the opposite side of that for me is that now I'm finished with a draft. And so I'm like, okay, it's time to think of another. It's actually like, nothing. I have nothing. Do, do, do. Come on, universe. Like, maybe that's all I had was 4 books and I'm done.
No,
I don't know. That's
no,
fine.
it's gonna come to you when you like least expect it. Like
Yeah.
much like the one thing that you need to remember like while you're at the store, as soon as you get home and like pull in the garage, it's gonna hit. Like
Yes, yes, that's what I'm hoping for. But so it's either that, I, it's either like all the ideas I want to put them in one story, and my feedback from beta readers is often this feels like it's a couple different stories. Like
yeah,
this isn't. You got to take some of this stuff out, or I'm like I have no ideas. There's just the well's empty. So it's
yeah.
never really any in between. My friend Noelle Eiley, she's a thriller author. She like can keep kind of a running list in her mind, like
Hmm.
of like what she wants to do. And she's like so good about like, and then she'll kind of be like, I'm not sure like what order they're going to come in, what's next. It'll like come up for her. Like, but she just always has this well of ideas. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm just like
I know,
that.
yeah. I know what you mean. I know what you mean. Okay. And then like last final questions. So you're reading Rapture right now, and you said you had a stack of books behind you. So I'm
Yes. So
curious what else is in that stack.
the only other one on here is If You Lie by Caleb Stevens.
Okay,
It's
I haven't heard of that
brand
one.
new, just
Okay.
released like Friday, I think.
Oh,
But
okay. Okay.
I beta read this and
Hmm.
gave feedback. And so I've been waiting for it to be in the world. It's so good. It's also a cult thriller
Oh, I
and
love
it's set
that.
on a cruise ship. It's kind of like got a new age Nexium type of cult
Yeah.
vibe. And it's really weird and creepy. And I really enjoyed it.
Okay, good. I'm gonna have to add that one to my list. I'm finally caught up enough like on my advanced copies that I'm like starting to read normal things, like not things on a deadline. And I
So
just started like
exciting.
yeah, I know. I just started 11/22/63 by Stephen King, and that is
Oh,
like
I haven't read that
rocking
one.
my socks off right
That's the
now.
one about Kennedy, right?
Yes,
I need to read
yes.
that one. I That keeps coming up for me. People keep saying it. I just keep seeing it everywhere. Like, and it's an old book, so I'm like, I need to read that.
Yeah, it's and like normally I am not a historical fiction in any way, shape, or form, like thriller, horror. Like it's just not for me. Like I'm just not somebody who's gravitating towards those kinds of stories. But there is something about this book that is just like there's like right now I'm on part four, and like for every part I have cried at one point. Like
I love
the
that.
character work in it is, I mean, it's King. Like he's got his normal King
I
stuff in it.
know. But
But
he's so
it's
good. I
I
mean,
know.
I know you know he's so good. I'm not
Yeah.
saying anything that we don't know. No, I
Yeah,
love it.
but
It makes me cry because it means that something is like hitting an emotional nerve that is hard to do, honestly. So,
yeah, yeah, I've had plenty of people like warn me like, "Hey, heads up whenever you start that you're gonna be upset." And then I started I'm like, "Oh shit, y'all are right." And like I have like a count in my phone. I'm like, I have a tally for how many times I've
oh,
cried so far.
wow.
And I
Okay, I'm
know it's just
totally
gonna get
doing that.
worse. But yeah, no, it's really, really good right now. And there's a couple other horror books like I really want to make a point to read before like the end of the year, like Laurel Hightower's Day of the
I love
Door.
her.
I think I haven't read anything from her yet, and I really, really want to read that.
She's so
Um,
good. I mean, even just like her short story collection that Every Woman Knows This, like the
yeah.
title story, everyone, I think that it's basically that's the vibe. I can't remember if I'm getting the exact title right,
Yeah.
but it is so good that I pulled it out one night on doing patio. I told her this, like I over because I was like, you have to know. I pulled it out and read it aloud to like girls doing patio drinks. Okay. And we were
Oh,
like
that's
all like,
awesome.
oh my God, she nails it. Like it's so moving,
Yeah.
so good. It's so relatable. Love her.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. No, that's like one of the one that I really want to get into her stuff probably before the end of the year. And there's like a couple free floating ones I just haven't had time to get to yet. But
Yeah.
no, I mean it's been another fantastic year for horror and all kinds of dark fiction alike. I mean,
Yes.
you name it, it's kind of had a moment this year.
So
But I
good.
am really excited that The Threshing Floor is going to be out on a week from today. A week from today.
Heavy 11. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Or
Yeah.
yeah, ish. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's incredibly exciting. And I've recruited a few people to read ARCs. I got my friend to read it and she loved it. I'm like, okay, now
Oh,
you gotta go back and read everything else now. Like you gotta
oh,
go back.
that's so sweet. Oh, I love word of mouth. Like I do that too with books I love. I'm just like, you have to read this. It's so good.
I know. I feel like I'm kind of annoying about it because I'll like harass people. I'm like, so did
Good.
you read it yet?
That's amazing.
Yeah, I'll
You're like,
follow up
you
on
need to
it.
like report back, please.
Yeah,
I need an
absolutely.
update. I warn people, I'm like, I'm gonna check in on you, so just know that.
I know, and like I have friends who are like checking in with me on like especially like a lot of older horror stuff that I just haven't read. And I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
gonna get to it, I promise. Eventually.
Yes. There's so many books, and there are
So
so
many.
many good books that how do
Yes.
we even decide? It's impossible.
I know, I know. I'm incredibly excited also that you're reading American Rapture because that's like, oh, that's such a good book.
I've
It's such a
been
good
waiting
book.
for it. I met her at Stoker Con, and I was like, I can't wait. Can't wait to
Oh,
read the
I
book.
know.
Damn girl.
It's it's so 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 good. But yeah, super excited for the Threshing Floor to come out. I really really loved it. I think that it checks a lot of boxes, and I think that it's a really nice convergence of like those thriller ideas that you nail so well with those horror things if you're looking for those.
Yeah.
And so I really hope that it resonates well with everybody else and like reaches like that wider audience that we can get both of those audiences to enjoy this one. But yeah, I'm just very excited for everything else that you have coming up. Yeah, is there anything else that I didn't mention that you wanted to talk about?
I don't think so. Just my book coming out. So good to meet you, like kind of in real life. Like it's yeah, like yeah, it's
Like
really
not over DMs, like not over
yes,
like yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
I totally
So
get it. I
fun.
totally get it. But yeah, so for everybody who doesn't know, Threshing Floor is going to be available from Dark Matter Inc. on November the 11th. And yeah, I really can't recommend it enough. I loved it, and I wish you all the best.
Oh, thank you, Anna.
Thank you so much for your time too. I absolutely have loved getting to chat with you about everything under the sun and horror. And I hope that we can do it again.
Yes, please.
Yes, thank you so much.
You too.